and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Psycho for the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman on the Pin Down over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. You should obviously be following Omari and maybe myself on Twitter and Blue Sky. You should be reading O2 on the Detroit Free Press. And since it's completely free, you should probably subscribe to the Motor City Hoops Substack, where I have put out some content on both signings. I guess one is a sign and trade of Caris LaVert and Duncan Robinson, the acquisitions so far this offseason. O2, how is it going? This can sometimes be a busy time of the year for you. We got through the draft, free agency starts. I'm sure there's a lot. I text you on the Duncan Robinson deal. I was like, hey, there's some conflicting stuff here with the partial non-guarantee stuff. Sham says hello from California. What's up? There's got to be some stress with all of that, right? Like making sure you get things reported right, double checking, triple checking. What is life like for you over these few days?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there's kind of I guess I would say like a rhythm to it. So, it's kind of natural, like whenever you try to report anything to make sure everything's straight, right? And there's always a lot of chaos surrounding any deal, but it's been fine. Like I always joke with people, like they don't have a first round pick. They didn't have a first round pick, like no firings, no hirings this offseason. So for them to just have a second round pick and then to re-sign Paul Reed, you get a couple of free agents, not super busy. Nothing will compare to like that first year when Trey first got in 2020. And it was just, they probably made 20 transactions over the course of like 3.5 days. So that was trial by fire. Like I don't think any offseason has been quite as bad as that one. So I've been doing okay.
Love it. Yeah, I'm sure you get into it. You figure out the groove. That first year of everything is tough. I remember the first year I was a teacher. First, it was a PE teacher, and then the first year in the classroom, and that's a lot. So Muhammad says hello from Beirut, and thank you for joining us. YouTube user says, what time is it in Beirut? I would guess that and I will not know the answer to this, 12 a.m. So that means they are closing in on Thursday morning already, right? That they're 8 hours ahead of me.
Tomorrow's Thursday.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
7 hours ahead for you guys in the Eastern times. Oh, Wes had Googled it already. Amazing. Okay, you guys, go ahead and throw your comments, questions, whatever in the chat. If it applies as we're talking, Wes will throw it up on the screen. If not, I would guess we have some time at the end of the podcast. We can answer some of those things. Just some housekeeping things. My guess is we'll record next Monday, Tuesday, something like that. And then Omari and I will both be in Vegas for a few days for the start of Summer League. Be able to hang out, watch one Pistons game, I think, for me. And then we'll obviously record once I get back and all of that. So Nashawn Smith, aloha and what up though? I assume we're Hawaii there. So O2, let's set the stage real quick because I think it's important to let people know where we were at going into the offseason because that is going to drive our feelings on what has happened in the offseason. For me, I had leaned into being okay with essentially some version of run it back. I had actually said that I would be okay if they switch some things up. Could you improve here or there, tweak here and there? Obviously, one big storyline really affected that. Were you on the same page going into the offseason before we talk about the moves that have actually been made?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong preference as far as if the right move is there, it's going to be there. But it's just looking like going into the offseason and you look at their asset, chest versus other teams. You look at, the contracts that they have, and it just didn't look like this could be the offseason where it makes sense to kind of make that quote unquote swing, whatever that looks like. And with the roster being as young as it is, there's probably a lot of logic, not adding more salary than you need to at the same time, right? Outside of maybe one or two guys. I think a lot of people have an NFL mindset where it's guys could get hurt, so you got to go all in, and this window may be 2 years. In the NBA, you have, your window is open as long as you've got a superstar. Milwaukee's still, putting talent around Giannis, we're seeing what Denver's done with Jokic, and they've had those guys for a decade each, right? So like, I just kind of see the NBA concept of like a window much differently. Like, as long as you have your guy, you're going to be in good shape on some level. They have Cade, and this is like the very beginning of their process of figuring out, okay, like, what do we add around this? And I don't think you go out and, burned up all your cap and now you can't pay your young guys or this and that. So that's essentially what they've done. They've maintained flexibility for the future. Obviously, the Malik Beasley situation kind of switched up their initial plan, but they've still addressed their need for shooting and ball handling, and they're not done. So I think this aligns, honestly, with probably what I would have done if I were Trajan, and it aligns with what he said he was going to do as well.
Yeah, let's start there with Beasley. Maybe for anybody who hasn't read articles, aren't fully engulfed in it, whatever, can you give some insight into what that situation is? I know we don't know everything. All of it is just kind of reported, or it seems a little bit up in the air. Like, I haven't seen that anything is like dead set on this is what he's been investigated for or how serious it is. I know there was another article that came out that kind of dove into a little bit more personal financial situation stuff with him that didn't sound great. I don't know how much we want to like actually dive into it, but ultimately this did change things, O2, because it sounded like there was going to be an offer on the table from Malik Beasley that was right around the non-tax MLE, which either means they would have operated over the cap and given him that, or they could have went under the cap and given him that. Like, I know this is something we'll need to talk about. Everybody's asking about that situation as well. Can you give us a little insight into the Beasley situation? Do you think he would be on this team if none of this stuff was being discussed right now?
Yeah, I mean, if the gambling investigation is never, like, if that news doesn't come out on Sunday, then they probably go ahead and sign him to the 3-year deal that was reported. I mean, I think both sides have been pretty transparent the entire time that they wanted him to be here long term, or he wanted to be here long term. But it's just the uncertainty of the gambling probe that forces you to change that plan, because you don't know like exactly how that's going to shake out. It's entirely possible that all this passes and ends up being a non-issue. There's also a chance that it could end up being a big issue, right? And it's just difficult to, I think, invest in a player like at that point when they have like significant availability, potential issues coming up. And again, he hasn't been charged with anything. It's very well possible that he's done nothing wrong and this will all be a thing of the past, but you still have that uncertainty. So yeah, I mean, for that news to come out roughly 30 hours before free agency started, the Pistons always have plan Bs and plan Cs. We see how they pivoted, but they did have to pivot. They did expect to have Beasley back next season.
Okay, so let's talk about that. They had to pivot, and they first started that pivot situation with Caris LaVert. This was the first signing. And so, yes, as Mr. Ray says, you can't bank on Beasley being 100% ready before the NBA season. So it makes sense for Trajan to move on. It seems like that makes a ton of sense, that they're just going to have to do this. And guys, I saw a lot of cap questions. So I'll be honest with you. I text Keith Smith, and because Keith Smith is the GOAT, he is going to be joining us for like 10 or 15 minutes in the next 30 minutes. So maybe we'll open segment 3 and Keith will answer like, hey, this is where the cap situation stuff. These are the avenues. Cause it is kind of confusing right now, because I think they could still be over or under the cap, like all sorts of stuff. So we're not going to dive into that stuff, because Keith is the GOAT. And Kyle is here as well. Kyle is also the GOAT. Caris LaVert, 2 years. What was it?
29 million, fully guaranteed.
Fully guaranteed. Initial thoughts on Caris LaVert, the player, how he fits on the roster, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he comes in and you have a clear need for scoring in the second unit. You have a clear need for playmaking in the second unit, and he gives you both of those. He's not quite a point guard like Dennis Schroeder is a point guard, but he's a guy that can absolutely move the ball. He's got a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio for his career, 4 assists for his career. So he's a guy that absolutely could take ball handling pressure off of Cade or J.I. And I think he kind of steps into that Schroeder role where, like, now with him and between him and Cade and J.I., like, you could always have 2 ball handlers on the floor. Like, I've always liked Caris's game. I think he offensively is not a perfect fit just because he operates at the rim and from mid-range, and that's where Cade likes to operate. So we'll see how that works out. But he also can knock down threes. I think Cade could generate some pretty good threes for him. So it's not like teams are going to be helping off of him significantly. I think he shot 37% last year. So he's still capable, right? So I think he checks a lot of boxes for this team. And also he's 6'6", so they could have some pretty big lineups lineups out there as well, where realistically J.I. may be the smallest guy in their rotation at 6'4". So I like Caris. I like his game. He's a different player from both Beasley and THJ, but I still think he fits this team pretty well.
Yeah, it was an interesting addition. I like Caris LaVert, the player. I'll be honest, as I went back through my notes for my post on the Substack and then went back and watched the game for the video breakdown on the Substack, I actually found myself more intrigued. Now, that not even considering the fit stuff, just like who Caris LaVert is as a player. I thought he opened defenders' hips a lot, which allowed him to get downhill. I don't think he played with the ball a lot, O2, which is something I appreciated. He can play with the ball in his hands, obviously, but it's not like he's like this ISO guy going to break you down, all of that. And I'm okay with that. Listen, we'll talk about do they need a third point guard still and a veteran guy and all of that. I understand that, but I like Caris LaVert's game. And there's a couple things they are mentioned in back-to-back comments here. YouTube user, LaVert is much better defender than THJ or Beasley as well and is bigger than Dennis. I agree with this 100%. I want to talk about the trio trade out from the end of last season to what looks like will be the start of the 25-26 season. And of those 6 guys, Ivy, LaVert, Robinson, and then the 3 players mentioned here, I think Caris LaVert is definitely the best defender, O2. Dennis is a good defender, but LaVert offers more versatility because he has a little bit more size. And then Mr. Ray said LaVert shot 36.5% from the 3-point line the last 3 seasons. I will go even further. I sent this to Wes. LaVert is actually really good on unguarded catch and shoot. What was it, Wes? 43, 44%, I think is what I sent you in the text. Wes might be able to pull that up for me. And almost 40% from the corners. Ultimately, that's all I need Caris LaVert to do, O2, when he's playing off the ball, is knock down those shots. And so that's what the film showed me, was he did all the requisite off-the-ball offensive things that the Pistons will need him to do when he's playing with Cade or J.I., or if it's Asar Thompson doing more ball handling, right? Ultimately, I think this was a good signing because it doesn't step on any of those guys' toes, but it gives you a very good third guard in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good rotation guard wing who could play in a variety of lineups. As long as J.I. or, Cade on the floor, maybe you say he's the 2, maybe you say he's the 3. I don't think it really matters. The reality is that you could put the ball in his hands and he could do some things for you. And yeah, like I said, teams are not going to be helping off of him too much because he could knock down threes. It's not like he's a bad shooter. He just isn't the type of high volume shooter that THJ is, but he's bringing a different skill set to the table. I think it's good. I mean, just since I've covered the team, the Pistons have not had many wings that check as many boxes as Caris LaVert checks. He gives you a little bit of everything. And yeah, I mean, especially with Schroeder signing with the Kings, he's absolutely a guy that's checking a lot of those same boxes in my mind.
Wes says 44% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. I believe that was going back 4 seasons is what I did. 39% from the corner. That might have been the last 3 seasons. Now, I will be fair. He was not good on guarded catch and shoot threes, which is why his percentage overall isn't 40%. I saw a comment here. I'm not going to be able to go back and find it, but someone said that Sam Bassini had talked about Caris's 3-point shooting in college. Very interesting. His last 3 seasons at Michigan, 42% on 4 attempts and almost 80% from the free throw line. Again, this isn't definitely not Malik Beasley, right? And we'll talk plenty about that, especially when we get to Duncan Robinson. Not even the same archetype of player as Tim Hardaway Jr. It's just not the same volume, probably not in the same shot diet, but he just gives you some things those guys, I know we all want to go 1-to-1 with these guys, but it's hard to do that because he's not the exact same player as Dennis Schroeder, right? But he's also not the exact same player as Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley. That's why I kind of like to look at it as a trio, and maybe we can do that once we get to all of it. What did you think about the contract? Oh yeah, where's Matthews at? Yeah, Matthews, for our guy from Brazil, as we're calling out people from all over the world, which is absolutely insane and incredible. What do you think about the contract? The number there, seems reasonable, seems okay to me. Any qualms with that?
It's basically the mid-level, right? And we'll see how they kind of crunch the numbers when it's all said and done as an under the cap or over the cap. But I think that's a market value contract for a guy who does what Caris does. It's a deal. Kind of with that, you look at how Orlando signed KCP last summer, and then that becomes a trade that gets you something different. And every year you see teams, go after guys in that type of skill set, and they can be building blocks toward other trades. So I think Caris falls right in that range. It's fair. Like, I have no qualms with it. There's a lot of guys who were in that MLE range, and he was certainly one of them.
Okay, let's go ahead and move to Duncan Robinson, because with Keith coming on at the end, we need to get through all of these guys, including Chaz Lanier, and then also kind of put a bow on how we feel about this and what else could have happened and all of that. Because when Keith gets here, I want to give him the time to just truly discuss, okay, because I know there's different paths that this could take. And guys, it's going to answer a lot of your questions in terms of over, under the cap. Do they have maneuvers and mechanisms to make more moves and all of that? So Duncan Robinson on a 3-year, $48 million deal. Can you break down what you have reported are the partial and non-guarantees on that deal for us to start off?
Yeah, 3 years, $48 million. Essentially, a 1-year commitment, because that second year is partially guaranteed, and then that third season, as a result, is non-guaranteed. So that basically means if they decide to part ways with him next summer, he gets a certain percentage of that $16 million, and they part ways. But it's a deal that works for both sides, and that because they acquired him in a sign and trade, it has to be 3 years. So you essentially make the last 2 years only partially or not guaranteed to fulfill that arrangement, but he gets more money up front. I know some people were like $48 billion, 16 in a year for Duncan Robinson seems like a lot, but the way the deal is structured, it's more like an NFL deal almost, right? Like, you kind of have to look at the actual language in the contract, and then you see it's not really what it appears to be. So he's a shooter. Like, he's going to step right into the Beasley role, I think, with no issues. He's knocked down 273s in the season. He's knocked down 263s. He's going to feast off of the space that, Cade Cunningham would afford. And he probably was the best shooter still available on the market, honestly. So, I thought it was good work by them to figure out a way to get him.
Let me ask you this. Who do you think for their career has averaged more 3-point attempts per 100 possessions? And I do think per 100 possessions is fair in this context, because this accounts for style of play, pace, minutes played, stuff like that. Sometimes per 100 isn't necessarily fair. I think it's fair here. Malik Beasley or Duncan Robinson? Who do you think average more for their career?
In my mind, it's Malik Beasley, but I also check cleaning the glass, and I see that a higher percentage of Duncan Robinson's shots overall are from 3 than Beasley, not by a lot. So I could see it being Duncan Robinson, but I still think it's probably Beasley by a little bit.
It is Duncan. It's not by a lot. It is fairly close. You want to guess who has a higher 3-point percentage for their career?
Oh, Duncan.
It's actually closer than you think, but it is Duncan.
Yeah, he's basically at 40%.
Here is my thing with Duncan Robinson. So when the LaVert signing happened, the immediate response, and I think rightfully so from Pistons fans, was, what about the shooting? What about the floor spacing? My thing with Duncan Robinson is he answers that question, O2. I'm not sure you can watch 10 more players, 20 more players. I don't know what the number is. There's not a whole lot of players that have the same 3-point line gravity as Duncan Robinson. There's real defensive limitations. There's real, general limitations. But the other thing is he knows how to use his gravity. I will tell you guys, if you want to see what I'm talking about, if you don't want to watch the LaVert breakdown, cool. You don't want to read my stuff, cool. Watch the first 5 minutes of the Duncan Robinson video breakdown I did, and you'll at least see what I'm talking about, where his gravity in one game not only got him buckets, but it also created multiple opportunities for his teammates. And I do just think that is valuable. Is he going to make 323s like Beasley did this year? Probably not. And I will say the one play type he is definitely not as good as Beasley is knocking down shots off screens. Even if you just look at the synergy numbers, Beasley has been better than him throughout his career on that. But everything else, if you want floor spacing, you want gravity, you want 3-point shot making, I think you could do way worse than Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, like I said, I think he was the best available shooter on the market. Like with him and Caris, you get a little bit bigger too. Like Duncan Robinson, 6'7". Like he's not a small wing at all. And I think he knows where to be. Like he moves the ball. Like you said, he knows how to use his gravity. And I'm curious to see, like you almost have that eternal debate in football. Like, is it can the wide receiver make the QB or is it the other way around? Like, let's see what Duncan Robinson could do.
Yeah, I thought about this as well. Like,
yeah, next to Cade, like he may have his best season. You never know, but he can step into the exact same role as Bees, and there's no reason to think that he can't knock down 43% with the quality of shot that he'll have.
Yeah, so that I had this question today because I understand like why people are like Malik Beasley, and I want to talk about that idea in general as well, and the fact that like Detroit didn't have any choice with Malik Beasley. Like, it's not like they chose not to pay him. They literally can't sign him right now. Like, it's not something you can do. But none of us thought Malik Beasley was going to hit 300 threes coming into this season either. And it's like, is Malik Beasley the only player that can play that role and do it successfully? And as Wes says, also, was Malik going to do it again this year? Like, was he going to get like historic 3-point shooting season? He deserves all the credit in the world for it. But was it replicable for him? So we'll get into all of that. We're going to go to break. When we come back, let's put a bow on this. Let's talk about, like, in general, these two signings, what it means, potential holes on the roster, all of that. I also want to then talk about Chaz Lanier before we bring Keith on in 15 minutes. Shout out one of my kids, Brian Contreras. Brian, you get shouted out by name because you put your name here. So, but one of our football players and students, appreciate him. Hopefully he's enjoying his summer safely. We're going to go to break. When we come back, let's talk about this in general, O2, before we move on to Chaz Lanier.
All right, we're back with segment 2. We're just going to pick up where we left off on this Duncan Robinson discussion. There's been a lot of debate, I think, just from fans and like in general, like can Bees replicate what he did last season? And so much of that's just dependent on minutes too, right? Like you have to actually be able to take enough threes to even get to that point. But to me, that's always been kind of arbitrary. To me, it's just more so like if you have a guy that you know could hit 250 plus 3-pointers at around 40%, like that's fine. And Duncan Robinson's done it more than once already. So that's kind of how I see it, right? Like you can look at, well, this guy made history and this guy may not make history, but if you're getting 250 plus made 3-pointers on a high percentage, then like realistically it serves the same function. And that's going to fluctuate based on role, based on minutes and whatnot. But that kind of goes back to what we said earlier. Like, do we know for a fact that Duncan Robinson can't hit 300 threes if he gets enough attempts, right? Because he's got one of the strongest track records for being an elite shooter as any player in the entire league. So he could be in that category.
Yeah. And listen, I want to be like, he's a negative defender like he is. In the breakdown, I was like, you know, he tries, he's in the right position. He just doesn't have impact because he's not super physical. Doesn't have great length and he's not super athletic. But man, the offensive gravity, what he created. And again, I cannot emphasize enough. He has learned how to leverage that gravity into rolling off a screen into the paint and hitting a little floater to finishing at the rim. There's one.
His rim finishing is like, yeah, like he doesn't take a lot of shots at the rim, but when he gets there, he makes a lot of them.
Because he creates wide open opportunities because of his 3-point shooting. My favorite one though is he runs from one corner to the other corner, gets a handoff with Khalil Ware and gets Khalil Ware a wide open dunk because his gravity drew two to him and then Ware rolled out of it. So listen, if Jalen Duren is who people think he is as a passer, as kind of not a hub of an offense, but can operate the offense, he should thrive with Duncan Robinson. Like there's no reason he shouldn't be able to do a lot of the same things. And so I think listen, I'm not saying it's perfect. Like this is going to come off like I'm super, like this was a home run off season. I don't think that. I think it's been fine. I think for someone who was fine with them not making a big splash and running this back at least until the deadline to find out what JI is, what Asar can do with an offseason healthy, what Ron Holland can grow into in year 2, I am fine with what they have done. Now, I do think there's one big hole on the roster that I'd be interested to see if you feel the same. I want to throw a couple things at you in the chat and our listeners. First, if Malik Beasley historic 3-point shooting season is the only thing that can unlock this offense, if you have to have that to unlock this offense, isn't that a flaw within the roster? Like, to me, every time I hear that, it actually makes me go the other way in terms of that makes me nervous, O2. If the only way this offense can function effectively is if you have Malik Beasley or the like making 323s on, isn't that an issue? And to be fair, I don't think that's true. I don't think you have to have that, but that's why I'm okay with, you know what, if Duncan Robinson makes 250 and has gravity, I think that's okay. Where do you stand on that? Because that's always my immediate reaction to that comment.
Yeah, I think it just kind of highlights the overall point is that you like this roster clearly is going to need some internal improvement from three because so many of the core guys are not, elite shooters. And really, J.I. is the only one who's put together, and he only played 30 games, but he did shoot 40% from three, and he was on pace to hit around 170, which would have put him in THJ range. So you have some of that, but like I would say that it would be a flaw because it just means, well, if your best shooter isn't playing, then you're not getting spacing anywhere else. And of course, that has a lot of knock-on effects from there. And I think you're already kind of facing that next season if you're looking at Cade, Ivy, Asar, Tobias, Duran. And Tobias is the best shooter in that group. And you're hoping, Cade could probably get above 35%. You're hoping J.I. can maintain what he had last season. Long story short, like guys are going to have to get better regardless of what Duncan Robinson could do. So yeah, last season, I think I did the math. THJ and Beasley were responsible for almost half of their made three-pointers. Last season, I don't think they would have been able to replace that production collectively. And that could still be the case next season as well. So like long story short, like I agree to an extent that if you need 300 three-pointers on 43% shooting for the offense to function, then, you probably need to make some tweaks somewhere.
Yeah. And listen, I want to be clear. I think you need floor spacing. I think you need shooting. All I'm saying is like, I see a lot of people push back that Duncan Robinson isn't good enough or can't like make up what Beasley did. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like to me, it's just about gravity and floor spacing. And it's hard to say he's not the best option for that. RB Nesbitt, man, this is incredible. Oh, you didn't ask a question. Man, he says, what up, fellas? Been waiting on the pod to drop. Can't watch live now, but we'll catch up later. Just wanted to show some love.
Hey, we appreciate you, Rodney.
That is love that is much appreciated. I was definitely getting to your question or comment, and you just dropped us some love. So we appreciate that very, very much. Thank you so much for that super chat. We love that, and we appreciate all of you. But RB's he's been with us for a minute now, covering, watching, and being with this. Okay, here's my second question. So at the end of last year, this team was pretty good. Agree? In the playoffs, pretty good.
Yeah.
So here's what they did. They took out Schroeder, Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., and they are adding in Ivy, LaVert, and Duncan Robinson. I realize Ivy was injured, but still, this question is more about just, is this team going to get better? Like, can they be better than what we saw at the end of last year, right? Like, that's where I'm going with this. What trio is better to you, O2? Schroeder, Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., or Ivy, Duncan Robinson, Caris LaVert?
Assuming Duncan Robinson can give you what Beasley gave you last season, and assuming J.I.'s shooting is sustainable for last season, and, I think the first assumption is fair. The second assumption is, like, we have to see if J.I. can do that for a whole year. Granted, I think THJ shot like 37%, so J.I. could still, he has some wiggle room there. But I do think ultimately there may be a little bit more upside simply because that's a bigger unit, and I think Caris LaVert could kind of be like a glue guy for this team, kind of like Tobias is, where he's just constantly doing productive things when he's on the floor and just maintaining some stability. As somebody asked me on Twitter earlier, they said, do you think this group is a step back from what we had last season? And I don't see it as a step back. I think it's just different. But if you're talking from a pure upside standpoint, I think Caris checks more boxes than THJ did. I think J.I. does a lot of stuff that you probably weren't going to get from Schroeder or THJ. And some of that's just almost J.I. improves and replicates last season too. But long story short, I think at minimum, it could be just as good. I don't see a significant step back at all.
I think that's where I'm at as well. I wouldn't sit here and argue that this team is better going into the season, but I don't subscribe to this team. This team took a step back. Now, some people say, well, they took a step back because the Magic took a step forward and the Hawks took a step forward and all of that. Listen, right now, I think I would project this team to be 6th in the East, which is kind of what they were last year. And I'm pretty sure we ended last year saying they just can't take a step back. It's okay if they stay the same, because you want to see for sure before you make a big move. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We'll talk more about this stuff. I know Keith is about to jump on. I want to talk Chaz Lanier before we get to Keith and move on to some of the other stuff. We haven't had a chance to do this since the draft. what were your thoughts on Chaz Lanier? This was your prediction. And so you landed that one. Talk about floor spacing. I don't know if it happens in 25, 26, but the one thing this kid does at an elite level is knock down 3-point jumpers.
Yeah, no, I did call it. So thank you for pointing that out. I had that as a selection, I think Sunday.
Hey, I'll call all your victories because you're about to buy me lunch in Vegas in a few days because of our last bet. So.
Oh man, I forgot about that. I'm glad you reminded me.
You're welcome.
You're not going to let me forget.
Absolutely not.
I think Chaz, at pick 37, again, I'm either taking the biggest upside swing I possibly can because some kid fell out the first round, or I'm just taking a skill that I know is going to help me at some point. And that's Chaz Lanier. He's one of the most elite shooters in the draft. Just the volume, just the balance he has, the quickness of the release. There's, to me, very, very little doubt that he'll be able to do it at the NBA on some level. I think it's just the other aspects of his game that people had issues with. He's not much of a passer or playmaker. He's not a ball hog either. He's just, an off-ball player, but he's probably not going to be a secondary creator for you. He's not the best defender. I know some evaluators saw him as being on the smaller side, but I compared his numbers to VJ Edgecombe and Con Newpel, and those guys, they all have similar builds. Even weight-wise, Chaz Lanier fit right in between those guys. So I think he has pretty solid size for a two-guard. And as we've been talking about, there's a need for some shooting on this roster. And you don't know what he's going to do as a rookie, but if he could come in and play 10 minutes and knock down shots, then that's probably a pretty good scenario. So that was the thinking behind the pick. We need shooting. He's a shooter. And at least in my eyes, he was probably the most certain pick at that spot.
Yeah, my one qualm, and everybody's going to know this, is I would have selected Maxime Renaud. That is my one qualm with all of this. Now, the thing is, if they liked Paul Reed, they knew they were going to bring him back, all of that, okay, that's all of a sudden a lot of sinners and where is he even in the rotation? And I get it. I would have prioritized Maxime Renaud, especially on a lower number, than bringing Paul Reed back as your third center, especially because he offers you something a little bit different. Outside of that, I am fine with this Chaz Lanier pick, right? It's still 37. It's still the second round. If you're not going to move up for Wes's guy, Noah Pinda, or my guy, Rasheer Fleming, then you're going to stay at 37. And I have no idea what the price was to move up. I guess we have a little bit of an idea because Phoenix did it to go up and get Rasheer Fleming. It was going to cost you some second round picks to go up and get one of those guys. Then at 37, Lanier's fine. I think it's fine value. I think it's fine process. We'll see what he can do in regards, can he shoot? He has to be elite, because none of the other stuff is super standoutish, but I'm fine with it. And go down, make shots in the G League, develop that, figure out the physicality of the NBA game. And then as stuff starts to play out, maybe he finds himself in the rotation down the road where he's coming off the bench and knocking down shots. And then you don't have to go pay for a Duncan Robinson or a Malik Beasley like they did last offseason, or Tim Hardaway Jr. I know all of those guys got acquired in different mechanisms and types of trades, even with Tim Hardaway Jr. and Duncan Robinson. I want to get to this. So Lodi 3, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you very much. Thank you. Duncan doesn't play any defense and he plays the same position as 3 other dudes. So who are you pushing out of the rotation? First, I agree that he doesn't play any defense. I don't know that he's a whole lot worse than Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley, to be quite honest with you. The second part, Wes and I talked about this literally all day long. And then our guy on Twitter, at Brad Villain, go check it out. Wes quote tweeted it. I think I at least liked it. You can find it. And he did a really sweet little breakdown of a really nice visual. And he has Duncan 22 minutes, 9 of them at the 2, 13 of them at the 3. And like I told Wes, he is a bad defender. So it doesn't matter if you're playing him at the 2 or 3. He's going to be a bad defender at either one of those positions. And this was getting minutes: 34 for Cade, 31 for Ivy, 22 for LaVert, 31 for Asar, 22 for Holland. It was getting all of the guys minutes that you want to get minutes. Now, if you add in somebody else, that'd be like a true backup point guard or a 4-man. This is a 9-man rotation he has here, but I think he can find minutes. I think this all works if you're playing JI/LaVert as your pseudo second unit point guard primary initiators.
Yeah, I think you can slide Duncan right into the same minute rows that THJ and Beasley had last season. I think B's played maybe around 28 minutes a game. THJ might have been a little bit under that before J.I.'s injury, and maybe that adjusted a little bit after, although Schroeder would have eaten into that as well. But they stepped right into those, like, pretty similar roles in my mind. Like, I imagine Duncan Robinson's probably playing between 25 and 30 minutes most nights. Like, if he's hot and he's closing the game out, then that's one thing. But there's going to be minutes. I mean, he's way too good of a shooter for me to even worry about who he's being pushed out because, you know, this team isn't quite deep enough, I think, to go probably consistently 10 or 11 anyway at this point. So, yeah, that's no issue with me. It's not like you said, Bryce, you're not losing anything defensively compared to last season anyway. So that's kind of, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do this. Ed Robinson says Duncan has a better defensive rating than Ivy. First, Ed, thank you very much for the super chat. I don't always love defensive rating. I will say, if you want me to be positive, I did think Duncan Robinson was more engaged and active than what I thought he was going to be going into the film breakdown that I did. I know J.I. is not great defensively. I would have a hard time saying that Duncan Robinson is a better defender than Jaden Ivey.
Yeah, like, I think, like, Ivy's issue isn't effort. Again, he just has more of a slight build, and, like, for him, it could be awareness at times. But, like, we're all comparing guys who are probably not going to be pluses on that end. Like, I think Ivy has a path to be, but at the end of the day, the people who are going to be heading the defensive attack are, you know, Duran,
Asar,
Stu,
Holland,
hopefully, and like to an extent, Cade as well.
And Caris LaVert, like, I don't think Caris's defense is being talked enough about right now, Omari. Like, I think
at the very least, he's neutral. Like, at the very least, he's neutral.
I think at the very least, I think LaVert is going to be a plus defender just because of the versatility of matchups, if nothing else. And then Ed says Ivy is just as bad defensively as what I'm saying. That might be fair. Like, I won't quibble with you on that. I at least think Ivy has more upside to be closer to decent. Keith is in the waiting room, so we're going to bring him on in just a second. I had one more question for you, and now it blew my mind. And so maybe we won't. We will just bring Keith on because he's the GOAT, and why would we keep him waiting? So, Keith Smith, welcome, friend of the podcast, friend of ours away from the podcast. I mean, you got way more important things to do than be joining us, but you're the GOAT.
I don't know about that.
How's it going?
It's going good. Hey, I have to tell you guys that Piston Pulse sweatshirt you sent me.
Oh,
my daughter wears it all the time. Like,
Shut
it's hers.
All right, love it.
I don't get. Yeah, she says it's really soft, but it's also like thin enough to like wear around Florida because it's these kids here in Florida, man. It's like 90 degrees and they're still rocking sweatshirts like maniacs. I don't get it, but yeah, she wears it all the time.
I love it. That's amazing. It honestly, O2, like those hoodies are really nice. Like I have one as well. They are very nice. I remembered what I was going to ask. And then Keith, you can get in on this as well.
Sure.
What is the biggest hole left on the roster for you guys? O2, I'll go to you first. Is it the backup 4 position or the 4 position in general? Or do you think they need some sort of veteran point guard? Like, I think we agree that Ivy LaVert has to take some of that role in the second unit, but would you like the addition? Like, Exum just got signed, but some like a Monte Morris or Corey Joseph, those are going to be names that Pistons fans love to hear too. So is it like, would you rather they sign Monte Morris to be the 3rd point guard or Trey Lyles to come in and be the backup 4? Like, where do you think is the bigger hole?
Yeah, I mean, I think they need somebody to replace Tech. Like, Tech was a really core part of the rotation just because nobody else really combined his size and at least threat of spacing the floor. I think Trey Lyles would fit into that spot, like, pretty well. But to me, that's the bigger need. Like, to me, whoever they sign a backup for has a real chance of playing a lot of nights, whereas you probably just need insurance at point guard more than anything.
Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, why don't you kill 2 birds with one stone and sign Ben Simmons?
Don't.
Come on now.
No. Keith,
here we go.
Okay, I appreciate you coming on, and now I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, no, I'm probably more there. Like Trey Lyles, I would see what Chris Boucher is up to. Maybe you could look at backup point guards. A guy who I really like quite a bit is Jared Butler. Who's out there?
Sure.
You know, it's depending on where they land with all this stuff. Maybe you make a call to Ryan Rollins. You know what's going on there, and that could potentially weaken a division rival. D'Anthony Melton could be in the mix. If you're, you got to see where he's at health wise. But that's another guy. It's just, I mean, it's getting kind of bleak here in the free agent pool at this point. We're kind of down to it, but yeah, I would look at different options. They still have a couple roster spots open, right? So yeah, I mean, fill them both out and just kind of see where it goes. Probably more likely to be maybe minimum signings unless you feel like you got to beat somebody's offer. So those guys, they're far enough under the tax no matter what. You can kind of cycle through guys too. If somebody doesn't work out, move on and go to the next option.
Sharon Dalton says, how can I get a Pistons Pulse sweatshirt? It's on the Free Press website, I believe. Maybe we can find that link and send it to everybody. Also, I will quickly mention, Keith and I went live, was that this past Saturday?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know. Time has no meaning.
Yes, it does not. We went live the Saturday after the draft, whatever Saturday that was, for 2.5 hours, breaking down the entire 2025 NBA draft. We legit talked about all 30 teams. So you can go listen to that on the Front Office Show podcast, YouTube channel, whatever, whichever you prefer. So check that out. We did just bring Keith on, but we also need to go to a break. So we're going to go to a quick break. And then when we come back, O2, let's let Keith break down the current cap situation for the Detroit Pistons.
All right, we are back with segment 3. Keith, I think me and Bryce and other people have, the Pistons have done so much, and there's so many paths they could take over under the cap. Can you give us a rundown of where the team stands as far as that right now?
Yeah, and I will very much couch this with we are estimating, because until we see actual details, because there are options for them, there's different ways. A couple of years ago, when the Pistons had millions of dollars in cap space, we knew these were all coming out of cap space. If you are way over the cap, we compete those together. When there's paths, there's different options. So kind of the 3 big ones we're looking at are Caris LaVert, Duncan Robinson, and Paul Reed. So Robinson is the easier one of the 3, because we know that's going to be a sign and trade for Simone Fontecchio. That will probably be executed after the Pistons. Let me rephrase. That will definitely be executed after they use cap space, if that's the direction they're going, because you got to use your cap space before you do that. It's just an order of operations thing. I don't want anybody thinking like, wait, is that deal in danger? No, it's going to happen. It's just an order of operations thing. So let's assume they're using cap space. So cap space, if you go under the cap, you have whatever you have in cap space, plus you end up with the room exception. So you go under the cap, you have whatever the cap space you have is, then you have the room exception. So in this case, what we're thinking is happening with the Pistons, if this is the way they go, cap space will go to Caris LaVert. That's where that will go. Paul Reed's contract, and there's so much rounding that goes on with these reports now when these numbers come out that it can be a little tricky. There's a couple, I know for sure they are the taxpayer MLE, and we rounded up very generously by $1 million or $2 million on a couple of the reports. And it's yeah, all right. I mean, whatever. I don't really care. But so with Paul Reed's contract, they can use his non-bird rights to plus up what they essentially off of his last deal. And crucially, it doesn't work off the cap hit from the last deal. It works off what his actual salary was, and where he was on a minimum, but he's got a little bit more service than the 2-year minimum. That would plus that up a little bit. I think that gets us close to in range. We'll see. We don't know for certain with that. But if that's the direction they're going, then that should leave, in theory, the room exception, or at least most of it, open to be used. Is there somebody worth using it on? That's only a question they can really answer for themselves. I don't know. It's like we said before, it's getting kind of bleak. It's the free agent market. We're starting to look at guys who are going to be targeted signings. They kind of probably already know where they're going, or they're going to be minimum signing. The other path for the Pistons would be stay over the cap. Nothing changes with the Robinson Fontecchio part of the thing. And that if you're over the cap, that could happen, first in your order. But then you give the non-taxpayer MLE to Caris LaVert, and then that could leave you in a position where you have now the biannual exception is open. Paul Reed's situation could still stay the same, but you would crucially start keeping the bird rights for a couple of these guys who are free agents. I know you guys have probably talked to Blake Beasley's situation, but we don't really know what's going on there. Let's just say in a month it comes up. Actually, we didn't find anything. He's good to play. Would be nice to have those, because at that point, cap space will dried up everywhere else. And it's, hey, you want to come back here for $7 million? Let's go. And that could be the direction that plays out. I kind of not even kind of, I very much don't think that's how it's going to play out, but you never know. The complications are a little bit with that is when we had talked before about paths, it was maybe stay over, and that's how you then use the non-taxpayer to re-sign Beasley. You keep Schroeder's or I think it was early bird rights. That's how you get him paid. Keep Hardaway's bird rights. That's how you get him paid. But we're not there now, right? Those guys are gone. So now we're in a spot where, all right, you don't really need to hang on to rights for guys anymore. That's what leads me to believe we probably went the cap space route here, and they're probably sitting on a little bit of spending power.
The room exception is 8.7. And I actually heard this question get asked on the front office show. And so I want to bring it up here as well. That can be split, right? So earlier we talked about a third point guard or potentially a 4-man. If we were talking Trey Lyles and they wanted to bring in Monte Morris or Delano Banton is a name I've seen Pistons fans throw out. If those guys were willing to sign for $4 million each, that is something they are very willing, or not sorry, willing is not the right word, capable of doing with that room exception.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can split that up if you want over a couple guys. Challenge was when you start talking about splitting an exception that is like let's just call it $8 million. You start talking about splitting that, you're splitting between 4 and 4. And I know what happens there is we're going to look at it because you're going to see, oh, well, a veteran minimum amount is only like 2.3 million, but that's what gets charged to your cap sheet. The veteran minimum amount for a guy who's got 6, 7, 8 years of service, you're up over 3 million. And at that point, it's like, all right, do we really need to split this? I mean, you could have two guys that are like, hey, we both want to come in, give us $4 million apiece, and off we go. So sometimes you get the combo deal there from an agency, right? Where it's like, hey, we got two guys, they're both want to play, you want to split it. But I think it's probably more likely if they go that route, they'll use the exception to just lock somebody in and get them. Your other option is you just carry it, right? You sign a couple minimum contracts, carry that room exception into the season. One, that gives you spending power. Something happens into the season. It also can be used as a trade exception if you wanted to do that down the line. It's a smaller-ish trade exception, but there's probably, off the top of my head, I don't know this, so nobody quote me on it, but there's got to be 80 or so players who would fit inside an $8.8 million trade exception. So you've got some optionality there with which direction you want to go. It's just, it's when people ask, well, like, why would you create a trade exception in a trade? Who cares? Nobody ever uses them. One, that's not true. They get used quite a bit now. But the other thing is, it's like I always use my dad as the example. My dad never went to the job site without his toolbox because he didn't know. And he'd rather be at the job site with his full toolbox of tools to fix the machines he's working on rather than be like, well, I got to go back to the shop because I didn't bring the right tool for this job. You put the tools in your tool belt or your toolbox. If you need them, they're there. If you don't need them, it's nothing lost.
Didn't Atlanta just traded for Nickeil Alexander-Walker? That was using their trade exception, right? To fit him in.
Yep. Yeah. And they may still, well, again, we're going to find all this stuff out here. And by the end of the week-ish, some of the deals take a little bit longer to finalize. But when July 6th hits 12:01, everything can start going official. The advice I give, if anybody watches front office show, I always say, a deal's official when the team tweets about it, because that's how you know that it's actually done. And when those all start going official, we'll start getting details shortly after that. And then what happens in that position is they'll be in a spot where you can, how do I explain it? You can kind of then see how this all pieced together. There's a chance Atlanta, maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker's number comes in slightly lower than what we think. And they fit both him and Luke Kennard in. And now they have the full non-taxpayer still to spend, because you can split these things up. The only signing exception you can't use as a trade exception is the taxpayer MLE. And that one's also small enough that it's pretty rare that you'd ever split that, because you're not going to get a lot of value out of splitting that one.
And then with the Duncan Robinson signing trade, can you just kind of break down the numbers with that, just so people kind of understand how that came about?
Yeah. I had to text Keith about this for the listeners. Like, Keith, I don't understand. Like, I understand base year compensation and half out and full in, and these numbers they're not numbering for me. This doesn't work. And then Keith, amongst the 3,000 text messages he's getting, respectfully text me back and explained it quickly. So.
you might be overestimating a little bit there on the number, but it's this time of year, right? There's a lot of stuff happening, but let me just double check, make sure I have Fontecchio's number correct. I believe it's like 8.3. Is that right? Yeah, a little over 8.3. So the trade bans now work slightly differently in this current CBA. So what happens here in the trade bans are the lowest band doesn't apply barely, which is part of why this is, well, it would have been close anyway, but $0 outgoing to up to 8.277 million. You get to use 200% of the outgoing salary plus a little buffer of 250K. So that's where you can get there. In Fontecchio's case, he falls into the middle trade band, which is you pick up at 2.77 and it goes through just over 33.1 million. That you use the outgoing salary plus you get 8.5 million extra. So that's the one we stick on, right? Is right there. His outgoing salary fits in that. That allows you then to use that, what they call it is an expanded trade exception in a trade. So they get to plus that 8.3 outgoing up by as much as 8.5. And that's how you bring in Duncan Robinson at 14 and change. It is there. That's how you match the salary on that one. Now, to be completely transparent, one, acquiring a player via sign and trade or acquiring player using more money than you send out. Those are either one is going to trigger a first apron hard cap. So they will be hard capped at the first apron. They're miles away from it. So it's not a concern with that. Just to finish it off, just because this is the educator in me. So I got to do it. Otherwise it's going to bother me. 33.1 million and up, you get to use 125% of the outgoing salary plus 250K. So that's like the big trades. And then if you're over the first apron or the second apron, really the first apron is the main one. You can't take back more than you send out because that again triggers that first apron hard cap. Just to be clear, it'll be hard capped at the first apron by virtue of sign and trade and taking back more money, but there's no double hard cap. You're just hard capped. That's it. So that's where they'll ultimately land.
Okay, I have two questions to get you out of here. One is still directly to the Pistons. The other one is the NBA at large. Dennis Schroeder deal, why was it being talked about as a sign and trade? Was the Valanciunas move to Denver part of that? Is that now not a chance of a sign and trade? And I heard somebody mention like Detroit should make it a sign and trade anyway and just like exchange some seconds so they can create a trade exception. So like, what do you think might end up happening here with the Schroeder stuff? Because it feels like that's not done and completely dead, even if it's not Malik Monk.
Omari, this guy says, I got one more for you about the Pistons and then ask 7 Pistons questions all rolled into one.
You know what's funny?
It's all good.
This has been a critique of my podcasting since day one. Literally a month into my podcasting, it says stop asking people multiple questions within one question.
I don't mind it.
You got to squeeze it as many as you can,
5 years later, I can't stop doing it.
Bryce, I still say, and right as my regular sentence enders. So I'm certainly only giving you a hard time because you're my buddy.
Yes, no, I know.
So when we get into the Schroeder of it all, so let's rewind when there's really, hey, this might be a sign and trade. And there's a lot of talk about Malik Monk coming back, which I would have loved for the Pistons if they could have made it work. But you weren't just getting Dennis Schroeder sign and trade from Malik Monk. They were going to have to plus that offer up. I imagine was going to be where that goes. And that's would be my guess is that's where that fell apart. Was the what else are you going to send out in addition? So now when we kind of get there, the thought process with that idea was one, it's really kind of the only way you were going to get Malik Monk would have been through a sign and trade because you needed to have money going out to get him. So that was part one. The other part of that was the Kings are in a position where it could have got a little funky if they just straight added Dennis Schroeder with the first apron for them. They could have been a little tight to that. Now, by trading Valanciunas out and bringing back Sarge, I'm keeping it very simple and high level. They cut Valanciunas' salary basically in half. That gave them wiggle room. So they no longer needed to get off of another salary to do that. So that's all kind of rolled into why didn't it happen is probably reasons with that. Now, your next part of make it a trade exception. You could, but if I'm the Kings, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm doing you a favor here because we can sign Dennis Schroeder straight out. And that's one of those creatively rounded deals that will be for the taxpayer MLE. It could have been a little more if they were doing the sign and trade part for Monk, but that will be for the taxpayer MLE. But what's going to happen in this position here is you would land into a spot where Detroit would probably have to pay a little something. That might be a second round pick or something like that. It's not it kind of became in vogue for a little bit there to turn every straight signing into, hey, can you do this as a sign and trade and give us that? The Celtics did it with Gordon Hayward once upon a time, created this giant, like 25. It was the biggest at the time. It's since been surpassed $25 million or so trade exception. And now it's kind of turned into a position where, all right, we don't, teams are not necessarily doing that as much. And I'm not going to rule it out. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. That would still then, Kings are already going to be first apron hard cap by using the non-taxpayer as the mechanism to get Schroeder, but it just gets a little messy into that position. So it doesn't, I don't know if Detroit wants to pay them to do that. I don't know what the value would be, especially if you're already sitting on an $8.8 million exception anyway. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, I promise this is the last question, and there will be 2 questions within it. It came out that maybe only a 7% bump on the salary cap in 26-27. My 2 questions are why, and did this surprise teams / affects? Is it going to affect teams? Can you explain that and break it down a bit?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It is. I'll answer the second part because it helps answer the first. I don't know that teams were fully surprised by this. I think they were maybe a little like, all right, let's see. There are some that feel, and this is the way it used to be with the NBA. It used to be, let's be a little more conservative, because if you hit the planning periods, which is like roughly the trade deadline, is when we'll get another update on where their projected cap is for next year. So let's say they say it's 7%. Then at the trade deadline, they're like, yeah, we think it's going to actually be closer to like 8.5. And then when we get there, let's say they say, actually, it's going to be 10. Then everybody's like, hooray, more cap space. Let's go. So no one really gets too up in arms if it comes in higher. They don't want to say 10 and then say, actually, guys, it's only going to be 7. So caught off guard, maybe a little bit, but some were preparing for it to not be 10. Part of the reason it came in lower, and there's any number of reasons for it, but a big chunk of the reason why is all across the league, they're having these RSN issues where whether it be the bankruptcy of the former providers caused issues there with the teams getting the payments that they should have got. It all flows into the what's called the BRI or basketball related income calculation, which determines the salary cap and the tax aprons and the revenue distribution and all that stuff. There's worries that that's not solved. In addition, you've had now, I think we're up to 3, maybe 4 teams say, oh, we're just going to take our stuff and put it over the air, which is awesome for the fans, but it doesn't bring any money in if we're dropping it over the air because no one's paying for those rights. So you start to add a lot of the revenue from the local markets in, and you don't get that starts to cause a little bit of an issue. And that's why there's some uncertainty, even though they got the big windfall with that. Now, here's the thing that teams are a little more nervous about. And I think this could be the reason. We've seen one rookie scale extension announced, Jabari Smith Jr. We've not seen any others. And part of the reason I think behind that is if you give them standard in a rookie scale is to give the player an 8% raise, those raises start outpacing the cap growth every year. That's where you can run into all of a sudden it's like, man, rather than the cap going up 2% more for a few years than in the contracts are going up faster than the cap. And that's where all of a sudden you end up just tighter to those margins, whether it be the tax, the first or the second apron. Everybody's running really tight against those. I want to be very careful. So I think that's probably put a little bit of a pause in why we're not seeing rookie scale extensions. Because normally some of the no-brainer ones, which to be completely honest, there was only a couple no-brainer max ones in this year's rookie class, like Paolo Banchero and maybe Chet Holmgren. Jalen Williams, definitely a no-brainer. That could be why there's just a slight hold. I think those guys will still get it. Anybody who doesn't get a non-max, it generally tends to take a little bit longer. So I wouldn't worry if people are, what's going on with Ivy? What's going on with Duran? What's going to happen with that? So the last piece I will say too is it didn't impact it this year because you have all the new media rights money coming in. Playoff series were very short this year. We didn't get very many 7-game series. So that's a little bit of less revenue that goes in there, which if let's say we'd gotten a whole bunch of 7-game series, get more revenue, that piles in. But remember, the cap growth was not to use the same word, but capped at 10%. So that spillover doesn't end up as great to the next year. So that could be why that number's down a little bit, among other reasons that we don't necessarily really get too deep into, or the merchandise things, or there are other things with that, but it's really hard to know.
All right. So Daryl Gulp says, good morning from the future. New Zealand Pistons contingency reporting. We love to shout out our listeners and viewers from all over the world. Somebody tweeted at us that we like reporting on the spot. Like, yes, we love to shout it out because it's really cool. Guys, I literally text Keith after we started recording this, whenever all of your cap questions came in. So one, that's what we do for you guys. We bring on the best, with all due respect to Kyle Metz. We bring on the Keith Smith and have him explain it. So we get all of the right stuff down. And also, this is why Keith is the GOAT, because he stopped his day to join us legit 20 minutes after I text him. So that's incredible. Thank you so much, Keith. O2, you have anything for Keith before we let him go and get out of here?
No, that's all I had, but we really appreciate you peeling behind the curtain of capology and all the different mechanics that are into it. One fun thing about being a beat writer is that every single offseason, there is one cap mechanic I've never covered before that I have to learn. So that's always fun, but we love having you on, Keith, and we appreciate it. Really.
Yeah, me too. Like this year, the big thing for me to refresh myself on was the whole, you can't wave and stretch too much on it, right? You've got a threshold on that.
This is the Bradley Beal thing, right? Like, I never understood it until now.
Yeah. So, and I've tweeted about that. I actually wrote about it. I played off one of my favorite childhood books. I wrote about Bradley Beal and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad contract. So you guys, if anybody's a fan of the Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, and he's moving to Australia, that I played off that, but I wrote in there about this is why they can't straight wave and stretch Bradley Beal, because they've already got some dead money on the books, and it just gets messy. So it's, there's stuff I have to double check all the time and refigure out too. So I never get frustrated or upset with folks, because this stuff is really, really complicated. And depending on your team situation, you may go years where none of it matters. And then you may have, oh my gosh, it all matters right now. And we got to kind of learn all of it here on the fly. But that's why I'm here. I'm happy to help.
Real quick, Keith is on Twitter, on Blue Sky at Keith Smith NBA. Check out follow both of those. The Front Office Show is YouTube. I'll let you do it. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, yeah, NBA Front Office Show on YouTube, and then anywhere you listen to podcasts, same names. You can get Bryce and I's Marathon Draft Show. If you're driving somewhere for the 4th, or you just need to get away from everybody for a little bit at the barbecue, throw that on. And when I tell people we went through all 30 teams and all 59 picks, we went through more like 90 players, because we covered a lot of the guys who went undrafted and are linking up on two-way deals and camp deals and other stuff. We talked a lot about them because nobody knows these guys better than my guy Bryce.
Appreciate it. O2, take it away, my guy.
Yes, with that, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always, and we'll talk to you all next week.